Welcome back to Sasquatch Theory. In this episode, I sit down with Tom from North Carolina, who has had some of the most fascinating and chilling Bigfoot encounters you'll ever hear. From riding his motorcycle past a Sasquatch that stood motionless in the woods, to finding mysterious tree structures pointing toward water, Tom has experienced it all, along with strange orbs in the forest, dogman encounters, and even a supernatural experience that left him with a sense of peace. Tom's story takes us deep into the mysteries surrounding Charlotte, North Carolina, and beyond. You don't want to miss this one. If you have a Bigfoot encounter that you would like to share with me, please get in touch with me sometime. And if you guys can, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and be sure to comment down below. With all that being said, let's dive into Tom's Bigfoot encounters from the state of North Carolina. All right, Tom, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
I'm doing real good. I hope you are as well.
Absolutely, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. Tom, if you would, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your experiences from the very beginning, please.
Sure. So I am born and raised in North Carolina. Kind of grew up. It's pretty common around these areas. Hiking, a lot of outdoors activities, hunting. Just playing in the woods as a kid. So spent a lot of time in the woods. In the general southeastern North Carolina as well as the North Carolina mountains. I've always kind of been really infatuated with. I'm in my mid 50s, by the way, so I guess a lot of people kind of got their start this way from the legend of Boggy Creek. I was a kid watching that, and kind of it just piqued my interest, and that interest is just kind of never going away. Never thought I'd have any experiences of one. Just wasn't sure if they were real, nothing like that. So it's just always anytime something came up or a show was coming on or anything like that, I was just always really, really interested in it, and had never seen anything, heard anything, probably until about I'll say probably definitely within the last 10 years. I'll say between 5 to 10 years, and it's kind of funny because you don't see what you've never been shown to see, kind of thing. So I've been going to the same places, my whole life, hanging out and stuff like that, and just didn't even really know what structures were or any of that kind of thing. And I go to some places now, and there's a lot of places. I think it's obviously your channel does a good job of spreading that that it's everywhere. It's just not all over where I live. It's all over the country, the world. There's just things to be seen that people think they know what it is. I couldn't sit here and say for sure I know what these things are or aren't, but everybody's got their opinion based on their experiences. So that's kind of how I got into it. I started seeing all these structures and stuff like that, and I still am. I mean, I'm just like fascinated by them when somebody pointed them out to me. And these things, when I say everywhere, the places I go hiking and stuff like that, they're everywhere. And people are walking around just like I guess I did for 15 or 20 years and just don't notice a single thing. Not sure if anybody's ever kind of brought that up to you before, or just weird, just never saw anything. But so in the last 5 or 6 years, I've got some places where I'll go and put out food and just kind of interact. And I'm not really a person that goes out. I do a lot of solo in the woods, so I don't really spend the night in those type of areas alone. So most of my stuff is during the day. But I'll put food out. It'll be taken. I'll put it in places where it's very, very difficult for like a deer to get to, or sure. I'm not saying they're not taking it, but animals aren't. I'm sure they are some of the time, but they'll be like signs. Like I'll leave a little pine cone out, it'll be turned around the other way. So I put it in the same spot. So I've been doing that for a while. I've had one visual sighting for myself, where and a second one that I've caught into a picture when me and my son were in the mountains. But the first one, I was riding my motorcycle, and I was coming through a little area where there's a lot of stuff in the woods there, and I guess it was kind of like a really sharp kind of S-turning kind of thing. But I mean, I was literally going about 10 miles an hour, and just kind of turn to the left. I'm not sure if I was turning to look at something or felt an urge to turn. I don't remember that part, but just kind of turned around and just saw one probably about 50 yards away or something, give or take 20 or 30 feet. I'm not that great with those type of distances, but it wasn't 100 yards and it wasn't 20. You know what I mean? It was about 50 yards, and it was just kind of a brown, dark brown, not black, but a dark brown, just huge figure, just standing there. Kind of, I don't know if it froze when I turned around. I got the impression that it was kind of turned to the side just a little bit, like not completely sideways, but I'm looking at like 3/4. If you're at your front, you just turn slightly a little bit, and it was just kind of frozen. So I don't know if it was curious about my motorcycle. It's really loud. Watching me because I come through there all the time. That same area. So it's where I hike and stuff as well. So that part I'm not sure, but it just was kind of it. The weirdest thing was I don't even know how to explain this. I feel dumb for saying this. The weirdest thing of all of it is I looked at it, saw it clear as day, turned back forward, and just kept riding. And didn't even I'm not sure if my brain was processing it, because it's not like I'm not somebody who's not familiar with Sasquatch, hasn't watched a million videos, and been kind of very interested in it for a while, and just was completely dumbfounded. I didn't feel shocked like some people say they are. In any way, I don't even think it changed my blood pressure or mood. I can't explain that reason. But I didn't look back. It's the weirdest thing ever. I mean, as I'm sitting here telling you, if you'd asked me, hey, what would you do in this situation? I would probably slam the brakes on and, get off my bike and look at it, try to get a picture out. I don't know, but just clear as day, you could kind of see everything, just a vivid image in my mind that, man, I wish I would have looked again. I just don't know why I didn't. Unexplainable.
Yeah. And can you give some context as to what you were doing that day? Maybe a general area. You don't have to say the exact location, but was it like southern North Carolina, eastern?
Yeah, it was just kind of on the outskirts of Charlotte, North Carolina. So less than an hour from Charlotte, North Carolina, and some woods areas. That's I guess the image I would paint is like hiking trails. There's water kind of nearby where people, canoe, kayak, that kind of thing. It's not a super crowded place. It's not one of these places. I know we live in different states. I'm sure there's a place I could probably mention here, and you probably have some of the same where, if you want to go hiking on a Saturday, there's 100 cars in a parking lot and you're passing 50 people on a trail. It's not that kind of thing. Regardless of what you're doing out in that area, you may see two or three other people that day. I mean, I've been out there hiking for 4 or 5 hours, never seen a soul. So it's people go there, but it's not super crowded. So I had just been riding my motorcycle that particular day. Like I said, this is an area I go to frequently because I enjoy, I kind of find my peace in the woods. I like to get out and relax in the woods. I don't solely normally go out just looking for Sasquatch type activity, but it kind of blends the two. I like to get out there and relax and walk around. I feel most comfortable in the woods. And of course, while I'm out there, I notice things. I have a very sharp eye for noticing certain things, that kind of thing. But to answer your question, that particular day, I don't think I was doing much. It was a weekday. I was piddling around that morning and just went for a motorcycle ride. And I think it was kind of on my way back when I just came to that little area when I was going very slow, 5 or 10 miles an hour, and turned around and looked. That's what makes me so mad. It wasn't like I was going 70 and caught a glimpse, and by the time you turn back around, you may be pretty far down the road. There's no, I don't have an explanation for why I didn't turn around. Maybe it made me not turn around. I don't know.
Yeah. And what stuck out when you saw this creature?
I feel cliche saying this, but just because I know how big they are, but even though I knew instantly kind of what I was looking at, just the sheer size of the shoulders, it was just huge. I don't know. I've thought it over and over. I hate to speculate because, people just attach that exact same size with it. If I said 9 feet, everybody thinks it's 9 feet. If I said 7, it's 7. I would say if I was going to guess, 8. I mean, it was taller than Shaquille O'Neal, but it wasn't like 10 feet tall. I've heard people say stuff like that, but I'd have to say it was probably around 8 feet tall, maybe 9, maybe 7, but 8 would be my best educated guess without trying to, make it into a fishing tail.
Yeah, that's a huge creature. So it just took off into the woods. Did it ever look
No,
back at
no,
you?
it never moved.
Okay.
So I when I was riding my motorcycle, I looked back to like I said, I just glanced over my right shoulder, and I don't know why. And it was just standing there, just completely still. It never made a movement. So that's why I wasn't sure if, I know they're pretty well known from flanking people in the woods and stuff, following people out. And it seems like it's always kind of like a 45-degree angle at your back. I don't know if maybe it was following me, like maybe a brief run and wasn't, checking my bike out or the loud noise. And maybe I turned around and caught it, but it was completely still when I saw it. But, you could see the detail in the hair, the face, everything. I mean, it wasn't like, this wasn't a mistaken stump identity or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe it just stood still so you wouldn't see it, or maybe it
That
wanted you to see it.
Yeah, I've had both of those two thoughts were kind of the rest of that day. What was going through my head? It was like either I turned around and caught it moving and it just wanted to stop. Maybe I didn't see it, and part of me kind of felt like it was so in it wasn't like it was hiding behind a tree. It's a wooded area, but not super thick, right? Where the trees are, you can see. Like if I'm standing at the edge of the woods right there, I can easily see back in the woods, 100 yards. So it's a wooded area, undeveloped, but it's not so thick or you can't see 10 feet back. So I saw it clear as day. So, I don't know if it's something going back there so often. And I think you told you in my text, we can get that later too, where there's a certain area where I pick up trash and I feel like they're putting it there. I don't know why else anybody would put little pieces of glass and stuff, but I've been doing that for a long time. I always like pick up the glass and take it with me. I don't know if it was maybe interested in me because it knew that I was the person doing that. I really don't know. I really do not know.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. And I can't
And that
imagine how
wasn't
you
that long
felt.
ago, too. Yeah, that was only about a couple months ago.
Oh, wow. So this is a recent sighting. Did
Yeah,
you find tree structures in that area prior to that encounter or even
Hu-
after?
hundreds. When I tell you there's tree structures there, I don't understand why most other people don't see it. It's like I said, you don't see what you're not shown because I've been going to this area my whole life and never noticed it until, I started seeing more of the tree structures and stuff like that on a lot of the YouTube videos and stuff like that and reading online, just because just always been very interested in Sasquatch, but they're everywhere. I mean, I could go out there right now and take 50 pictures of, I sent you a few pictures. I mean, all of those I've taken, within the last, I think most of them probably within the last couple weeks. Maybe there might have been one I sent it was pretty old. But yeah, I mean, I don't even, I think I told you, I know you talk to a lot of people, but I've taken so many pictures of tree structures. Like I don't even take pictures anymore unless it's something just extraordinary, but it's always different. If I went there, let's say if I went on a half a mile, just short half a mile hike, if I went there like on a Monday, a Wednesday, and a Friday, there's always something different. That big tree I showed you, that was perfectly parallel to the ground with a with that other log that had been split in half that was made a perfect cross. It was almost symmetrically directly in the middle. That's why I feel like sometimes I can tell some of these things. It's like it's too perfect to be natural, kind of. But that was done within the last probably 5 or 6 days. I'm guessing. I can't remember exactly what day I went out there, and then I went out there either yesterday or the day before and took that photo. I think it was the day before yesterday. It was, yeah, the day before.
Yeah. And can you elaborate on some of these structures that you found? What are the most complex
Sure.
structures you found, and what do you think they are?
So I think that Sasquatch is doing it, but I haven't seen one do it. So I know there's a bunch of different levels of logic when it comes to Sasquatch and stuff like that. So I consider myself a realist. I just look at stuff for what it is. So the stuff that intrigues me is the stuff that I'm looking at. And there's literally no way that trees could fall like in pixie sticks, you know what I mean? And make this crazy, like this one had to fall first, right? Then how is this one on top of that one? Then how is this on top of that one? So, there's definitely, I'm not a person that walks in that area that has so many structures and every single tree is leaning on another tree or bent over or something like that. I don't think every single one of those are potentially done by Sasquatch. I know there's a lot of things that can look like Sasquatch structures um, that are natural, and I think and this is just my belief. I think that they do it so it looks natural because I'll stand there, and what I like to do is, the structures is one of my favorite things. is just stand there and stare at it. Because a lot of times people walk by it and they look at it for 10 seconds and take a picture. But I found that if I stand there for like 10 minutes, I just keep noticing other stuff. And I'm sitting there and I'll reach a point on some of these things, where like this limb's been arched and it's bent over on this one, and there's another X, folding on this one, that kind of stuff. I just sit there and I just think in there, there's just no way this could happen naturally. The branches that weigh, hundreds of pounds aren't even from there, that kind of stuff. But I see a lot of, um, the parallel trees, and some of them are big, some aren't that big, but one I saw maybe a couple months ago was probably about as big around, like if you put your arms in a loop, about as big as a circle as you can make your arms. That's how big the base of it was, but but it was perfectly parallel to the ground. It was probably about 40 or 50 feet long. And it's just wedged like left, right, left, right, left, right between like, 8 or 9 other trees, which is what's holding it up. Like, there's just no way it can fall between like that because there's other trees that are in the way. And then the base of it, which was clearly snapped off, it didn't look like an old tree. I'm familiar with how trees fall. Like I said, I have a lot of experience in the woods. So it was fairly fresh, snapped off. And the tip of it was like balanced on another tree that had been broken off, but you could see that the trees didn't match. So I couldn't even figure out how I got it there. I mean, I could take my 10 strongest best friends there and we couldn't recreate that, so it didn't even look like it could have fallen that way. But I see a lot of those, a lot of the arches, there's, hundreds of arches, I would say, out there. Sometimes there'll be like 8 or 10 just kind of right together. And, and I could look at a tree and I'll try to look, okay, did another tree fall, catch the top of this and bend it down, but there's no other tree around it. And then the arch is in a perfect semicircle. It looks like it was drawn with a compass. And then the tip of it's held down by another tree that's laying on the ground that's snapped off, that doesn't come from that location. A lot of X's. The X's are some of my favorite things, especially the really big ones. There's a picture I can think of. It's like there's like a pole about a tree. I said a pole, a tree with no limbs, completely cleaned off. Where it's like the bare wood. It's leaning at like a 45 or 60-degree angle, and that thing's probably as big around as my waist, maybe 25 feet tall. And then there's a huge another tree that's forming an X at the top of it, and then there's another tree that's forming another X at the bottom of it. And then those two that are making the X on the big pole are perfectly, geometrically parallel. It's the stuff, some of the stuff that's just so perfect seems to stick out to me a lot. But there's a tree that was, I'm trying to think of some of the ones that just come to mind. You want me to explain the types I see? There's a place where there's a tree that, like, for it to fall naturally, it would have had to fallen, and it's still alive. And then it split these other two trees into a perfect V, and they're all just like, so the trees laying kind of on the ground, and then these other two huge trees are forming like, like a protractor grade perfect V, and those are sticking up like 30 or 40 feet to each side. And then of course there's all other kind of, stuff weaved, the typical stuff you see where stuff's weaved in together, like a very intricate weaving, and like 10 or 12 trees that are, I describe it as almost like the old things you play with when you're a kid, the pixie sticks. They're just in this weird formation where just doesn't make any logical sense. Like sometimes I'll look at some of these things and I don't even think I could figure out, like if the tree was going to fall naturally or something, I don't even think I could figure out how to make some of this. If I was as strong as a Sasquatch, I feel like they're smart. I don't even think I could recreate some of these structures, even if I was strong enough. A lot of that stuff, there's no way a human was doing, but, probably couldn't even do it with a chainsaw. But I'm just always very, very fascinated with the structures. I've rented a mountain house. I know I told you, I don't know if this is really a sighting because I saw it in a picture, but me and my son were playing. It's kind of funny. I felt like he was watching us. We were wearing the same shirts, me and my son and my dog. We were playing in a pretty popular area in Western North Carolina, not too far from the Nantahala. We're just playing in a little river. People go through their tubing and stuff. I saw a bunch of tree breaks and stuff like that. I didn't really have Sasquatch on the mind. We're more just, hiking with my son. But when I got back home, there was one that was, I don't even know what made me zoom in, to be honest with you, because it's kind of off in the distance. So I took a selfie kind of, facing us. And then if you look in the back, there's one kind of, it's really wooded, and he's elevation wise, it's probably, I mean, this is kind of in a ravine or a gorge where it's very rocky. If you're familiar with Western North Carolina, and the two sides go up probably 100 feet at a not super steep angle, though, maybe 45 degrees. So the river's kind of at the bottom of this, and I'd say it was halfway up the gorge, whatever you want to call it, maybe 50 to 75 yards. So you never notice it. I mean, if I had zoomed in on my camera for whatever weird reason, would have never seen it. But it's like the tree is about maybe a fourth as wide as the Sasquatch, but it's kind of at its left side, like completely perpendicular to me. And the body of it, which is kind of hidden by trees, you can kind of make out the darkness of it because it doesn't match anything else. If you're looking at it, would be to the right of the tree, and then the head is kind of looking around, to the tree. And that image, I feel like there's different types of Sasquatch. From what I've seen, this is just my visualizations of watching hundreds of videos and stuff like that. I'm not talking about the ones that are clearly fake, the ones that at least you think are real. There seems to be ones that are mostly black, and I feel like most of those are kind of more ape-like. The kind of cinnamon and tannish ones, I feel like are kind of semi-human, kind of in between as far as the face. I mean, I think the bodies on all of them are about the same, but and then the gray ones that I've seen, the kind of darkish gray, lighter gray, kind of silverback color, those to me seem like they have the more human face. It's almost like they're wearing a hoodie. But this is exactly what this one looks like. He looks like he's wearing it. That's what me and a friend of mine, when we talk about it, that looked pretty real to me. Like you see a video or something, he was wearing that gray hoodie. Most people don't even know about that. They're trying to fake a Bigfoot video, but this one was one of those what I call kind of the gray kind. The one I saw a couple months ago was brown and kind of had more ape-like face with humanistic features, maybe I would say, where this one looks a little more human. But the face is that palish gray white. The fur, it's hard to see because it's kind of it's blocked by a lot of the trees and stuff, but it's more of a human-like face.
Yeah, that's
That
incredible.
picture's not, it's not super crystal clear, but if I'd say 50% of the people, I haven't showed it to a lot of people, but some people are like, oh yeah, you know how it is, you either see it or you don't. It looks, I mean, I knew what it was instantly, and I wasn't looking for Bigfoot. I was just kind of zooming around looking at the trees and stuff, and it just kind of shot out at me. But yeah, that was that one. And then the one that kind of took me by surprise was a family member of mine who hikes with me sometimes, and we talk about it. I don't really talk about this stuff to a ton of people, to be honest with you. I mean, it's not like if somebody comes up and talks to me about it, I won't. I just don't walk up to somebody at work and say, "Hey, did you see Bigfoot today?" That kind of thing. But I was driving out, and this is kind of near Pageland, South Carolina, kind of headed out that direction, maybe somewhere between. I don't remember the exact pinpoint location of it, but this was probably about 6 months ago. I never really believed in dogmen. I thought if people saw dogmen that, I'm not saying, I didn't think people were lying. I just thought that was a mistaken identity of Bigfoot. I guess the way a lot of people think that if you see a Sasquatch, that's a mistaken identity of a bear. So I didn't really, wasn't something I thought about a lot, or, I hear reports and all this stuff and that kind of thing. But I guess I hadn't seen really videos like I have of Dogman. But it's funny, the person that was riding with me just makes fun of me. We joke about it because he doesn't believe in Bigfoot, and just kind of jokes around with me sometimes. It's kind of like a kind of joking jab each other kind of thing that we do. But we were coming up, going down there, and there's a lot of structures on, in some of these places because it's kind of underdeveloped. You're kind of getting out in a rural area, but there's a lot of structures I see him on both sides of the road, and he kind of gets mad at me when I point stuff like that. He didn't want to hear about it. So he'll just say, please stop talking about it or something like that. And I'm doing it mostly joking to kind of mess with him. It's not like I'm really sitting there trying to bother him. But all of a sudden he just said, Dad, I just saw, he mentioned my dog's name. He said, I just saw so-and-so on the, but it was standing up. And I was like, what are you talking about? I had no idea at this point what he was talking about. Because it just like, and my dog's very muscular, kind of pit bullish looking. It's not a pit bull if you think about that mentality, like with the really thick muscular legs. And he said, yeah, I just saw something standing up. And it looked just like the dog. It had those super muscular legs. He said, if the dog stood up, because my dog will sometimes stand up and uh, put his, I was about to say hands. He didn't have hands, his feet on your chest. And, if you're looking at him from behind or directly forward him, you got that unmistakable non-human, like just dog legs, right? And he said, yeah, I just saw something that, and I'd never heard him say the word dog man, not even sure if he knew what a dog man was, but he said, I just saw that. And I was like, are you serious? And he said, yeah. And he said, there was another one laying down on the ground beside me. And as soon as it saw me looking at it, it vanished. And I was like, wow, I mean, this is a kid that doesn't believe in anything. And, um, making fun of me about Sasquatch and stuff like that. And that was kind of a weird experience for me because, I'm okay with the Sasquatch being in the woods. And like I said, I'm not scared of any of the animals that I was born and raised with. For some reason, the dog man thing, I have that in the back of my mind now sometimes. Not if I'm just going, the hiking trails or if I go out deep in the woods or something. I definitely have that on my mind where I'd never thought about that before. And what amazed me by it was just, who told me they were a non-believer. And something that I have, if I'm jumping around a little bit, Miguel, let me know. But what I was going to say is I was one of those people that probably up until 5 or 6 years ago, roughly maybe, that just thought that Sasquatch was a primate, and a lot of people some people were like, well, there's no way it could live in the woods. Yeah, go try to find a silverback gorilla in the woods. They have to have like trackers, track them for hours. So, they know where you're at before you know where they're at, so they could easily stay away from you. And I just thought it was one of those kind of things. But you know, I've heard people talking about them, whatever you want to call it, cloaking, vanishing, like that. Since I kind of, or no, this was before the dogman sighting that my son had, but I've seen some videos on YouTube. There's one you may have seen it. I think most people have seen them all, where uh, it was like a trail cam or something, and it was like 3 or 4 Sasquatch around a car or something. They're almost kind of translucent looking. And I've also seen a video online a couple years ago where it was really on more of a ghost type video, but it was the lower body of something just sprinting, full speed. Like, I can't remember if it was across a parking lot or woods or somebody's yard, but I was just like, the first thing that stood out in my mind was that kind of looks like the gait of a Bigfoot, the big knees coming out and stuff. But anyway, so I've kind of started to think more. Maybe they're more cryptid like. I mean, that's kind of what I think these days. Where I was the person that laughed at people, not laughed to somebody's face. You know what I'm saying? I'm a pretty respectful person by nature, but just kind of jokingly internally, like, yeah, these people are a little cuckoo. Cryptids vanishing. But I've seen orbs. So there's something to it that we don't all know. I guess there's more to it than I can explain. Maybe that's the easiest way to say it. But I know what he saw that day, and I know the way he described it was just almost like he was drawing it in my mind with a paintbrush.
Yeah, you
He
could
saw it
tell
crystal
he
clear.
was being honest.
Now he won't talk about it. He
Mhm.
does not like to talk about that at all. If he doesn't he doesn't get angry or one of these people where it like traumatizes him. He just doesn't want to talk about it. So sometimes I'll say something, like, hey, dang, check that structure out. We haven't seen that before. And he goes, he's joking, picking at me. It fell that way. Anybody can tell you that. It's just human nature. And I was like, well, what part of human nature was that dog man on the side of the road with his buddy laying beside him? And he'll be like, just laugh, shut up, that kind of thing. He doesn't like to talk about it, which I guess is pretty common. Um, I'm so intrigued by that type of stuff that I'm interested in it. I'm interested in hearing what other people. Obviously, you are why you have your show, but I'm very interested, kind of like yourself, I guess. And I like to hear other people's stories. You don't always have to agree with everyone, because nobody really, in my opinion, I'm sure there are some people that have had, uh, you know, firsthand contact. You've heard of people meeting families of them and stuff. I've heard that over the years, but generally speaking, I think we all have our opinions. that nobody truly knows what's going on. But I do think it's more to it than we know.
Yeah, absolutely. The logical mind will be skeptic of the cryptid phenomenon, but also people who encounter something like a dog man, they'll also bury it in the back of their mind and try to never resurface that memory. Just talking about it really brings people, trauma, pain, bad memories, or they just don't want to think about it. And
I
also,
get
it's
that.
the ridicule too. Even someone who's seen Bigfoot, if you tell them you've seen a dog man, even the Bigfoot people will sometimes roll their eyes, but these things are out there. And I feel the same as you. Like when I'm out there doing research, especially when I'm camping at night, walking through the woods, I think of dog man because I heard one when I was like 11 or 12 years old, and this thing howled so loud. It was demonic and just disturbing. And I've never been able to wipe that from my memory. And it always resurfaces when I'm out there in the woods at night.
Yeah, and for some reason, for me, and it's funny. Like, I mean, if me and you went together, would we really be any safer from one of these creatures than if we're alone? But I feel a whole lot better when I'm with somebody than than when I'm alone. But he saw this thing was like, we're imagine kind of paint a picture. We're driving out to an area that's kind of headed toward Pageland, kind of out in the country. So you might see a few houses, maybe a neighborhood here, and then you don't see anything for a couple miles, that kind of thing. And so this was like right off the road. It wasn't like he was seeing this 200 yards away. I asked him, I was like, "How far off the road?" And he's like, "Right by the road, right by." I'm like, "Are you talking about like 30?" No, he's like, I mean, I think the best way to explain it is like 10 or 15 feet off the road. Just into the tree line. But like I said, that area, it's not. There's definitely some areas that were so thick you couldn't see 10 feet into the tree line. But this was another area, maybe a little thicker than like where I had my sighting. But you definitely could see 20 or 30 yards in there pretty easily. So to see something 10 or 15 feet, I mean, he saw it clear as day. He's describing stuff like he's describing a picture he just painted.
Yeah,
But that
absolutely.
changed things for me. That definitely that because I was not expecting that. When you hear a story like that from somebody that is a 100% non-believer, that's the best story that exists to me. I'm sure there's somebody listening that they think everything I'm saying is a lie. It is what it is. But I don't have any reason to lie about anything. So I don't know everything. I don't pretend to know everything. There's people that have had way more experiences than me.
Hmm.
I just feel like I'm really drawn to nature. Like when I go out into the woods, I feel like some people are just going in there to see if they can get 2 miles in, and they're looking at their watch to see how many calories they burn and stuff like that. I'm going into the woods to appreciate the woods. That's just I love the woods. When I was a child, me and my friends played in the woods until my parents made us come in, and that was pretty much every day. So I'm out there looking at all the trees, just appreciating the beauty. The opposite of a phone and television, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, just getting out in nature and refreshing your mind. But I think it's typical for people, even people in North Carolina, to think, well, I don't know if I believe in these things. If they do exist, they're probably out west in the mountains or the Uwharrie National Forest. And I've found structures in Greenville, Spartanburg, South Carolina, next to developed areas. Like there'd be these patches of pine trees, and there was just structures all over the place. And like you said, people drive right past them and they never even notice them. And it's
Yeah, that's
wild.
everywhere.
And by
It's everywhere
Charlotte,
around me.
like there's Kings Mountain. There's been sightings there, and that's just right outside of Charlotte. A big city, a lot of people, and it's wild how close these things are to people. And the logical mind will think that they're either in the Pacific Northwest or just in a huge set of woods. But these things have the ability to hide from people in pretty much plain sight.
Yeah, there's some main roads not too far from where I live. Right in southern South Charlotte, where just on the side of the road, there's one of my favorite arches. It's a tree. Maybe I'll just snap a picture of it. I'm sitting in my car right now. Maybe I'll snap a picture. It's funny. I've never taken a picture. So this is at a hospital, at a four-way or three-way intersection. That gets backed up at 5 o'clock traffic for probably a mile, and literally right at this intersection. I think it's one of my favorite ones just because of where it is. But it's a tree that is And there's a little pond there. I feel like a lot of these trees that are broken over in tree breaks, seems like a lot of them, I won't say all, but point toward water. But this tree, when I say point toward water, it's like 30 yards from the pond. But there's a tree that's probably about a foot diameter, maybe a little bigger. And, there's no bark on it. It's got that kind of, it's almost like it's made to stick out, I feel like sometimes, where it's got the yellowish looking bark. And then it fell like perpendicular to the street, pointed toward that little pond. This is in a guy's yard, kind of. So it's kind of a big yard, and it's overgrown. It's wooded close to the road, and then there's a perfect arch where it looks like maybe a limb. All the limbs are broken off the tree that fell, and then there's like a little nub or something. I can't remember exactly what that's holding the smaller tree, which is probably, I don't know, 3 inches in diameter, maybe a little bigger, smaller. But it's, how the arch is. It's always held down by something. I'm assuming you know what I'm talking about. Where it's just in a perfect arch. It's literally, if I was sitting in my car right now at the stoplight, I could look over and I could probably throw a pistachio and almost hit it. Like, I know I said pistachio, I'm sitting beside some. But it's kind of crazy. It's all over here. If anybody listening is anywhere near this area, look on either side of the road on Highway 1, like if you were headed like toward like the Raleigh area from Charlotte. I mean, there's hundreds of arches, structures, don't looking at it, but there's stuff all up and down both sides of the road back in those woods. It's completely underdeveloped. I think it's, I don't know if it's government land or city land where they have those, every 100 yards, you have those same little posting signs. But yeah, it's everywhere around here, which like I said, I didn't see any of this stuff until somebody kind of showed me. I thought I knew a lot and I didn't know anything, but they're everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can confirm that when I went to North and South Carolina, I've noticed the same thing. Like, wow, there's a lot of structures here. And I look for these things all over Missouri and they're hard to find, but that place is just littered with them. And they're the encounter stories that proves that there's a lot of Sasquatch there. There's so many encounters from North Carolina for some reason. I don't know why, but it's one of the BFRO's top states to do research and look for these creatures.
Yeah, I know some guys that go dual sport motorcycle riding up in the North Carolina mountains. You get up around that whole western area, even not super far west, even like Little Switzerland, some of these areas. But they go up there and camp out for a couple of days and they ride all the trails. But they say like up at Uhari, they hear vocals and stuff they can't explain, tree fall, stuff like that all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Did I get that correct earlier? The Uwharrie National Forest, or is it like a state forest? I'm not sure. I might have gotten that wrong.
I think it is national, but there's so many like parks and stuff around my area that I get mixed up because I just call it like so and so park or so and so because I'm not sure what how they're managed either. But and then I was telling you about this is another experience I had, and it could be coincidental. So this is one of those ones I'm not going to say for sure what it was, but I had a feeling inside me, like an instant, like something was communicating with me that I couldn't explain. Right. So I was telling you about the place. I'm not sure if we've talked about it on the phone yet. I know I maybe talked to you about it in text where I've been doing this for a couple of years where there's a place where I think that the Sasquatch started putting it there. It's a place where people, like, it's not densely traveled, the trails, but people do go out there. So, you might see a couple people if you go out there hiking, you might not see anybody, that type of thing, but it's not uncommon to see a few other people. But I kept passing this place and it was kind of off out of the way. It was kind of lower, like almost kind of like maybe at some point it might have been a pit or something, right? Maybe 10, 15, 20 feet. It's kind of not circular, but that's just what it kind of looked like. But it's full of limbs. So now it just looks like a small indentation. Maybe you just kind of notice an impression, right? So there's an area, maybe if you set two cars beside each other, just, maybe a couple inches lower than the rest of the ground around there. But I kept walking. I was cutting through there to get to another trail. And I just kept noticing. I didn't think anything about it. I kept noticing there was like bunches of little pieces of glass and, syringes, pieces of Coke bottles, just junk is basically what I'd like to explain it. But a lot of it was glass. And it looked like it had been placed there. And I was like, maybe somebody's putting it there. But the more I thought about it, I was like, why would anybody put little teeny pieces of glass right there? And who would know about it? Like, I'd walk by it 100 times and never seen it. So for a couple of years, I've been picking up the glass. I take a bag with me and pick it up. And there's since I've been doing that, there was, there's always a couple pieces. See, I just thought it was trash, right? And there was a lot of it. So it took me about, I'm not carrying around a 55-pound drum. I'm carrying around like a 20-gallon clear, like extra strength Ziploc in my backpack. And so it's not a huge backpack for day hiking, right? So I just get whatever I can get in that bag. It probably took me about 10 bagfuls to clear it all out. And then I kept noticing when I come back, there'd be 2 or 3 other little pieces, or maybe a rusted little part of a beer can, that kind of thing. So something's putting it there. I feel like that's what it is. And I would leave a pine cone or something. I feel like there's a big connection between Sasquatch and pine cones. But I put a pine cone on top of there's like a little, not little, but a quartz rock that's maybe like a 1.5 feet in diameter. It's obviously not perfectly circular, you know what I mean? Just a big quartz rock there. And I put a pine cone on it. And then I can't remember the first time the pine cone was removed and there was another rock that was in its way. This is a place where people don't walk. So unless an animal picked the rock up, I don't think a human did it. You don't really see it from the trail. And so now, like I said, I've been doing that for a couple of years. So I just went by there when I took that picture of the tree that had fallen. That's probably about 50 yards from the place where I've been cleaning up the trash that's left there. But there was 4 or 5 of the pieces there. This time it was kind of weird. It was almost like it was sat there so I couldn't miss it. But there was like a baby food jar where I don't know if it was so old the label had come off or somebody was using it for something else. It was really old looking, but it was sitting right on top of the rock. So I took that with the other 4 or 5 pieces of glass and did that. But one time when my son was with me, and I was picking up the glass, I leaned over and I had put a pine cone or something there before. I don't remember what it was, but it wasn't what was there. And then when we came back to clean it up like a week later, see if there was any other trash there was it was like a pine cone still attached to like a 6-inch little limb. You know how they look? They're all kind of black looking when they get old. So it was just sitting there on the rock, just kind of stood out, the contrast of it. And I leaned down and because there'd been some other places where I felt like they were communicating with some pine cones and rocks and stuff and the food, but I hadn't really seen much communication there. That was the first time I'd seen any kind of what I thought was a response. And when I leaned over to pick it up, and at the same time, I told my son, I was like, see, they're trying to communicate with us. When I said that, a tree fell. It sounded like it was, it had to be at least 24 inches in diameter. And it was literally like, it sounded like it was like 50 feet from us, but we walked over there and it was so loud. It wasn't like, did that come from left or right? And we walked over there and couldn't find it. We couldn't find where the tree fell, but it was almost like one of those really good kind of freak me out moments, kind of the opposite of him seeing the dog man, where I was like, yeah, they're communicating with us for sure. There's no way that was coincidence. Or no, I'm sorry, let me back up. There is a way that was coincidence. I just don't think it was. I'm always really careful. I would like to say anything I say on this show, anybody else talk to me, I'm saying what I believe, but I don't start every sentence with I believe just because I would, want to jump off a bridge by the end of the day or whoever I'm talking to. So, I don't think anything that I say is factual other than, obviously when I saw the one from 50 yards away and when my son saw that, obviously these structures, there could be an explanation that could come out tomorrow that would make us all go, oh, we all thought this was Sasquatch. But anyway, I believe that that's what it was. I've been in the woods my entire life, over 50 years, and that's the first time I have ever heard a tree fall in my entire life. And that wasn't cut down with me watching somebody cut it. And it was literally 1 second after I said it. Wasn't like I said it and somebody sitting around waiting on a call or something. No, I said, look, they're communicating with us, and bam, it just the loudest noise shook the ground. That was cool.
Yeah, absolutely. When they push over the trees like that, they're letting you know that you're getting too close. And these things are very territorial, and that's their way of communicating with people and with the other clan members. But I agree with you. It's hard to say if the structures were really made by Sasquatch, but when you're out there looking for them, when you're looking for sign, you have to look at everything critically. And like you said, these arches, it's not like a big tree fell on the sapling and bent it over. Some of these are poked into the ground and they're held by nothing. And it doesn't make sense. Like, how is an oak tree going to bend itself like that, or a pine? And I mean, unless it froze and it was like 0 degrees, -20, there was like a rain and ice storm, the trees will arch like that. But when the sun comes back out and everything melts, they straighten back out. Some of these, you can tell they were manipulated, and you find X structures and other things around there. And it's in areas where you had your sightings at. So it's really hard
Yeah.
to write off, but obviously you weren't there to watch them make it. And that's how I feel. I'm very careful when I talk about this on the channel. And even then, I get a lot of ridicule. I'll point things out in the woods, whether it's like a vertical tree, a tree break, and I say, I don't know if it was Sasquatch. And then people in the comments say, Miguel thinks everything's Bigfoot. Even when I'm careful, people still say that I'm
Yeah,
saying
and
everything's
I'm not
Bigfoot.
like that. Yeah, I don't. I've watched quite a few of your videos, and I don't feel that way at all. Like, I think the first name that comes to mind, and I actually like this guy. So this isn't a negative, but like Todd Standing, everything he sees is Sasquatch. I do believe that he's in an area where there's a lot of stuff, and he's had a lot of stuff like that. But every single thing he sees. So let's say if I see like 30 structures out there, I will see 2 or 3 that, like, okay, if all the stars lined up, there's a possibility this could happen naturally. So when I say I don't know what's making it, I know nature's not making these things. I mean, I've seen too many things where there's no way in the world a tornado, 2 tornadoes from 2 different locations would have had to pick these branches up and bring it over here, form them in a perfect X, and then there's going to be about 6 different forces that are going to have to make this tree on top of that one. If that one's on top of that one, then how is the other part of it underneath this one? And then how is that part of that one underneath this one and over that one? I've looked at some structures sometimes for 15 or 20 minutes, and not only am I convinced it's not natural, like, if I took 50 people out to the woods, I couldn't recreate this. Like, I couldn't recreate it.
Yeah, a lot of them are intricate and they're like geometrical. I just think they're really interesting because if it is Sasquatch, they're communicating and that's their language. And how many times have we heard someone say, I was out there, I had this sighting, they were wood knocking, and then I heard a loud branch break? Well, if they broke a branch, shouldn't you be able to find evidence? And I feel like that's what these structures are. And a lot of the structures that
Yeah.
I found are in the exact areas where I've had pretty intense Bigfoot activity. And you can hear him back there pushing over trees, breaking limbs. And I go back there later on and find structures. And it's like, this is exactly where that limb break came from. So for me, 2 + 2 = 4. For the skeptic, it was a hurricane, a tornado, wind damage. And that's okay. It doesn't bother me, but I know what I
Yeah. Yeah.
experienced, and that's all that matters.
Yeah. It's just like anything else. There's some people that you're not going to convince of anything. And there might be a subject where, other than Sasquatch, or maybe somebody else might think I think the same way like that. Like, you're not going to convince me of whatever this is, So, like I said at the beginning of when we first started talking, I actually not only respect, but I actually enjoy hearing other people's interpretations. Like, I'm not the person, if we were walking out in the woods and I said, wow, that must have been a big one that made that. Can you believe that? And if you would have said, I don't think that's a Sasquatch at all. I think this happened. I wouldn't be like, no, you're crazy. I'm like, that's the point. Everybody's got their point. I'm not saying you're right and I'm wrong. I'm not saying I'm right and you're wrong. I'm just saying that's what I believe.
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially running the channel, you get these reports where, oh, I was sitting out there and they were speaking to me in my mind and they told me this and this and this, and I just listen. I mean, obviously I'm skeptical, but also like I've seen Sasquatch, and if that's real, like what the heck else is real?
Yeah. And that area I'm going to, there's some trees that have been knocked down that are like half as big around as my car. I mean, like, huge. Like, it would take 6 people to hold their arms, maybe not that many, 3 or 4 people to like wrap their arm, like a huge tree, right? Several hundred years old. And like, how has that tree been knocked over? And then there's 2 other trees that are, like, technically, if you look at it, it possibly could have hit them, but they're perfectly parallel at a 45-degree angle, like where it would have had to fall perfect. But it's kind of thick, and like, that tree's still alive, and it fell 6 months ago or something. And there's been no winds. Like, I've gone in an area where, like the tree I was telling you the other day, I just took a picture of. Like, I'll go to these areas so frequently that I notice the stuff that's different, right? I kind of enjoy that. That's almost as good as going to a new area for me, just seeing what's different. It's different every time I go. Something's been changed, a new structure. This log was moved, that kind of thing. That I just feel like that, like there's just no way that nature could, because it's like, why didn't any other tree fall down? This one tree that's 10 times the size of all the other ones around it. It hasn't rained hard in the last few days. It hasn't been windy. There hasn't been a storm. What made this fall 3 days ago? It could have. It's just highly unlikely that nothing else was touched. I just see that so frequently. For me, I think some of it is a feeling. I always go into the woods open-minded. I don't go in there looking for Bigfoot, or I don't look at a structure and immediately go, that's a Bigfoot. I investigate it, and then my mind forms its own opinion. I like to look at things objectively, but I'll look at things all the time. I'm like, yeah, that's just a tree fell. That's just a tree fell. And then I'll look at something else. Like I said, I'm walking down a path, right? I'll see 3 or 4 things, won't think anything about it. And then all of a sudden my eyes will lock on to something, and I can't really explain it. It kind of stops me dead in my tracks, and I just start analyzing. It's almost like I instantly know that that's not, like a sixth sense. I know that that's not natural. That did not happen naturally, or at least I believe it. I strongly believe that. And I know I completely agree with what you're saying about the, when they're knocking the trees over. I think it's kind of a warning sign. Primates use that a lot. I've done a lot of research on like silverbacks and stuff like that, because they build structures and stuff too. But the weird thing was, for this particular one, I felt the biggest, and I could have made this up in my mind, but it could have fallen naturally. But when that tree fell, right after I told him, they're communicating with us from that pine cone, from cleaning up the glass, they don't have to step in it. I felt just a kind of a sense of relief, just a quick euphoric sense of relief. Like, I don't know, I just felt that. I felt like that was a communication that they were letting me know, thank you for cleaning that stuff up. That's what I thought. I've been, like I said, I've been cleaning that stuff up. It's a lot of junk. It's dirty. I just don't like it there. It bothers me for all the animals, not just for Sasquatch. Shouldn't be glass in the woods.
Yeah, that's an interesting theory, and it very well could be. Let's talk about more of the activity that you experienced earlier. You mentioned you've seen the orbs. Can you tell me more about that? What do they look like? What happened? And did it happen in an area where
Yeah,
you've had Bigfoot experiences?
yeah. A lot of it's in the same area, and me personally, I haven't seen but a couple orbs like myself, and it's usually kind of off in a distance. They're kind of floating around a little bit, and then maybe you'll hear a tree break or something like that by it. But I've watched a lot of videos that are Sasquatch related videos, camping videos, like motorcycle dual purpose videos, and I'll just see an orb shoot across in the background. And the weirdest thing is when I see that, the person, especially if it's not like a Sasquatch researching type video, usually within 5 or 10 seconds of seeing that orb like shoot by in the back of the screen, I'll see somebody turn around like there was a sign, but they're not looking for anything, so they just kind of turn around and go back to what they're doing. And I've also seen it on quite a few, like where people are doing research, and it's not a bug where it's flying around. I mean, it's something that's as straight as a laser. It just sticks out as unnatural. I know what it looks like. And sometimes I'll rewind it if it's on a video and look at it a couple of times, because I do see things sometimes where a bug will fly by and it kind of looks like it. This is different. It's not the same. It's definitely an orb. So I've seen quite a few of those. I did have one other experience that wasn't a sighting, that was just kind of very strange. It's at that same area where I've been cleaning up the glass, and I feel like, when I say I feel like I have a connection, I'm not texting these Sasquatch and stuff like that. You know what I mean? It's just, I feel like they appreciate me coming in there and cleaning up the grass, and I leave food and stuff like that. Um, like I said, I have seen a couple tracks, and I just feel like they appreciate that. I'm not saying they want to friend me or anything. I'm just saying I feel like that when I'm in those woods, that they appreciate that I'm not the person that's coming in there throwing their Doritos bag, off to the right as they're, still walking through the woods, flipping a cigarette butt, that kind of thing. I don't, anything I take in with me, I take out, and I don't chop down things that are living, that kind of stuff. So I respect the woods. I feel like that's appreciated. Um, there's one other thing I was going to tell you. This is kind of was a weird experience. I'm kind of even hesitant to tell it to people, because this is probably going to bring out the comments that I probably don't want to read. But I was at an area it's like I think it might be a state park. I'm not sure, but I was walking. I'm gonna try to paint an image. So it's an area that has kind of like picnic tables around a lake, and there's kind of a peninsula area, right? So there's a bigger picnic table kind of at the end of the peninsula. And all of these picnic tables are surrounded by the water, but there's a peninsula that goes out into the lake. And then there's probably 4 or 5 picnic tables. When I say picnic table, it's got like a little concrete slab, little area, where you can sit down and I think they each have grills, maybe 2. You can sit down and, grill some hot dogs or something. So there's like the one in the middle, and there's like 3 or 4 on each side of the peninsula. And then on the backside of all that, the point of the peninsula is toward the lake, is a place where you can park your car. And during the week, there's never anybody there. I mean, you hardly ever go to this. There's other areas of the park you can, but this one spot, you don't really see anybody. So I was out over there, and was just kind of going to walk out toward the end, and that last little picnic table out at the end of the peninsula, you can't really see until you get closer out there because it's kind of arced a little bit. You see it when you get to about the 4th or 5th picnic table. You can see if anybody's out at that one. And when I got out there, I got about half out there, I saw there was a guy sitting there, and I didn't think anything about it. It did just briefly, not in a weird, suspicious way, but I was like, that's kind of weird. He's wearing work clothes and work shoes out there, but could have just been fed up with work for the day and would come out there and chill. But I didn't think anything, didn't have any bad vibes or anything like that. And then so what I did was, as I turned around, because we're in a place like that, especially if there's nobody else there. I mean, how rude would you be to walk up and sit right near somebody? Right? I'm not that person. So I went to the farthest picnic table away, had my dog with me, just had a couple snacks. We've been out walking the trails a little bit. So it's a good place to just sit, watch the lake, and kind of chill out. And I went down toward the bank. So that if you imagine the picnic table is raised up maybe 5 or 6 feet higher than the bank below it. So you kind of walk down about 10 or 15 feet to get to the edge of the water. Like I was letting my dog play in the water. So when I walked down there, when I turned around and looked up, that guy was sitting at my picnic table, right? And I instantly had bad vibes. Every red flag in my body went off. Like, why would you come sit here, man, when I'm clearly out hiking with a backpack with my dog? I walked up to you, saw you turn around and came back as far as I could get away from you. You see me, and you get up there. So at first I was kind of like, maybe he didn't see me sit down there. And I was like, no, because my water bottle wasn't on the picnic table where he was sitting, but it was like 10 feet away from him. So I'll be honest with you. I don't really disrespect people in public, unless it would be like self-defense or something. I don't know if this guy, I don't know this guy, right? But I was kind of perturbed. Like when I walked up to grab my water bottle, I kind of gave him a dirty look. Like just kind of looked at him like, wow, you really had to come here. There's 9 picnic tables, and this is the one I'm sitting at. And so I went back down to the one where he left and kind of looked back at him a couple times. Like it kind of pissed me off, to be honest. It was just disrespectful, I felt like. And I went back to the one at the end, didn't think anything about it. And I had my dog with me. He'd hurt somebody unless they pulled a gun out, which I guess they could. But I sat there for about 30 minutes, and when I got ready to leave, this is where it's going to get kind of weird. I even feel kind of weird telling the story, but I'm telling you exactly how everything happened to me. And this is at a place where a lot of those other things have happened. It's all right there close together. So as I'm walking back, I look over at him. He was just on his phone, didn't even look at me. I was going to say, hey, just try to be polite, walk, because I had to walk pretty close to him to get by him, kind of pinch his end back there at that, where he was at. And when I was walking, when I got about what I feel like 30 or 40 yards past him, halfway to my car, I heard a couple footsteps behind me, and I turned around and I didn't see anything. It was just like, or like pat, pat on the gravel. It's gravel. And, it could have been anything. My dog's walking. So it didn't, I thought I heard it. I was pretty sure I heard it, and turned around and didn't hear anything. And when I turned around, I did see him sitting there. And I think he had kind of turned toward me. He could have just been looking while I turned around to see where I was going. But when I looked back around, I heard 2 footsteps right behind me, and it scared me. And I knew it wasn't him. When I say scare me, I just didn't look back. I don't know if scare me is the right word. He was way too far away. I knew it wasn't him. There's nobody out there. But I heard the first 2, turned around, saw nothing, turned back around, heard like 2 or 3 more. And at the same time, I went, I'm pretty sure that's footsteps again. All I can tell you is I felt this warm sensation around like my whole left side, from like my back, like lungs area, under my armpit, around my kind of like lower back butt area, and then just a little bit on the right. The best way I could describe it would be like if you walked up behind your wife or girlfriend, and you walked up from behind her and approached her left side, and you put like your shoulder into like her back and put your arm around her lower back. That was the coverage kind of I felt. You know, my whole left side below my armpit, down to my waist, just on the side, and then kind of across my back. But I didn't feel a hand or anything like that. It almost felt like a warm blanket had been wrapped around me. And at the same time that I realized this, my feet were, this is the weirdest thing to explain. My feet were still touching the ground, but I was completely weightless for about 7 to 10 steps. So about the time, you know, I went through this quick, this all happened, you know, 7 to 10 steps, a couple of seconds. I went from like, wow, almost like I'm, you know, something was touching me, to like, am I floating, to like, I was back on the ground, and I was like, yeah, I was, you know, because I was, when I say floating, my feet were still making contact with the ground, right? But I had zero weight. Like it was like I was floating and just scruffing the ground is the only way I can explain it. And then I was just set down, and as soon as I felt my weight back, I felt that whatever that was around me, I had described it as a warm blanket, but in the shape of maybe something that had come up beside you and put its arm around you from the back. I felt the most strongest sense of just peace and safety. And I felt like my life had been saved. Like in my mind, I just knew it. I don't know how to explain it. You know, there's a voice inside your head talking. I was like, something just saved my life from this guy. That's what I feel like happened. But you know, I don't know if that was Sasquatch related. You know, my mom passed away a couple years ago. This happened like last year. I don't know if my mom was looking after me. God was looking after me, which God's always looking after you, and he works through others. So that also could have been, you know, when I say Sasquatch or God, you know, only God's going to protect you from something like that. In my opinion, I respect other people's opinion. That's what I believe. Man, that I felt like it should have freaked me out, and I felt amazing the rest of that day. I don't know what it was. I felt like I literally felt like I was operating at 100% the rest of that day. Just had the best feeling in the world. None of that may make sense to anybody listening to it, but I just wanted to share it because it was at that same exact, you know, same spot.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a supernatural, godly encounter. But like you said, you don't know if it was Sasquatch. Maybe it had something to do with it, but it's definitely hard to say. Did you feel like a physical presence, or was it more supernatural?
I,
Can you describe that?
yeah, I felt like something was like it all happened so quick. You know, I mean, it sounds like from the first couple steps to got my attention when I turned around to when I turned back around, and it was kind of like when I told you when I saw the Sasquatch full on myself on my motorcycle. Why I didn't turn around when I heard the second steps, I don't know. I mean, why wouldn't you turn around when you're out somewhere where you just saw a guy that was doing some pretty weird, creepy stuff? Why wouldn't you turn around? I can't answer that question. Something didn't want me to turn around, or didn't, you know, I didn't turn around. I don't know why, but it was just a warm presence. Like I felt something on me. I felt something touching me. It felt like a warm blanket. That's what it felt like to me. It felt
Yeah.
like a blanket had touched my side and lower back, but it was in the position of like if somebody had lowered themselves down and wrapped their arm around you from behind and kind of picked you up and carried you is kind of what I felt like happened. But yeah, that's probably the craziest thing that's ever happened to me. I've only told like 2 people that.
Well, I appreciate you
Uh,
for sharing that with me. And I've heard that same description from other people before, especially it feeling like a warm blanket and you felt like
wow,
peace.
that's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, that's a common thing when it comes
I've
to
never
the
heard that. Yeah,
yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah, the supernatural. And as far as driving past the Sasquatch or riding past it, that makes sense to me. Obviously, people in the comments are going to be like, "Why didn't you stop? I would have stopped." But I mean, like, how many times have like people, I don't know, let's say for example, like you clearly ran into like a girl that likes you, she keeps staring at you, or you guys kind of hit it off and you didn't ask for her number, or you never approached her, and you look back and say, dang it, why didn't I ask for her number? Like it's kind of like that, you know, you kind of kick yourself in the butt and wonder why you didn't. Like all the signs were there. I don't know if that's a
Yeah.
good comparison, but
No,
we're talking
no,
about
what you,
Bigfoot.
what you said just rings so true with what I was, which what I think is, um, you know, I was, um, I've been in shock before, where I was injured, and I was in a pretty bad car wreck. Luckily, I was just like sore and had glass in the back of my head, no like really bad injuries, but bad enough to total the car and knock me out. Right. So, um, and I know that when you're in shock, you kind of do things and say things. Your body's an autopilot, which is the best way I'll describe. Because when people were telling me some of the things I was saying or doing, I don't remember it all. Like I remember doing it, but like why did I do that instead of not this? So the only thing I can say is I think sometimes your body protects you. So even though I never felt fear or anything like that, never felt in danger or anything like that, I think it might have been a shock to my mind, or maybe my mind didn't let me look back. That's very common when people go into shock, like because it's all the armchair quarterbacks that tell everybody the thing they shouldn't do. Well, you know, like if you were running from a grizzly bear, you have no idea unless you've ever run from one. You think you know what you would do. Your heart and your brain is working so quickly that you are not thinking. There's something else that's taking over your body. Your brain is an autopilot. So I think it might have been something like that, because I would agree with any comment that somebody would make. Why in the world would you not turn around? I'm asking myself that in a more angry way than anybody would ask that in a comment section, or ask me if they're my I can't answer that question. I have no idea. It kind of bothers me a little bit because I wish I would have gotten off the bike and take a picture of it, or just stared at it a little longer. I mean, that's the thing that you dream of if you I never in my entire life thought I would ever see a Bigfoot. Anything, I never thought anything would happen to me, until all this stuff started happening, 5 or 6 years ago, or other than reading something in a book, or maybe seeing the old video, or 100 people think it's fake, 100 people think it's real, the old debate, that kind of thing. I never thought I would have any of this stuff happen. I feel blessed in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. You are amongst the chosen. And it seems like the Sasquatch are attracted to certain individuals. Maybe you're marked, maybe you're tagged, maybe they can read your body language and they're comfortable with you. Maybe it's a pheromone that we release. It's hard to say, but for some reason, certain individuals continue having experiences out in the forest, and there's no explanation as to why. And I'm sure every person out there who knows what I'm talking about wonders why themselves. Like, why do
Yeah,
I
I've
have so many
often thought about that.
experiences?
I think, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, you're fine.
I think that they have powers of communicating telepathically, and I think human beings do too. I think we're all just so, you know, not to go down a wormhole, just so dummy down. We use 10% of our brain, whatever. I think we all have that, because some humans can, but I think we're so untaught that, over years. Things change, but because I've definitely gone into areas before where I kind of felt like they didn't want me there that day. I've definitely, as soon as I walk in there, just gotten a really, really bad vibe for no reason whatsoever. I was feeling great until I walked in there and just got a really bad vibe. It's happened a few times, bad enough where, I kind of cut my hike off short. And there's also been times where I've come in there and I actually, not like the warm blanket experience, like whatever happened that one day, but just feel a little better than I did when I walked in there. Maybe that's just nature, nature therapy, but I do feel like that they, like when that tree fell, usually that tree is known for like, you know, dominance, or like a dominance factor, fear factor for primates. But I instantly felt just that sense of like I was being thanked for cleaning that stuff up. But I think they know, like I do this, depending on where I'm going, like a lot of people, it's best to protect yourself with something when you go in the woods. When I enter the woods, I immediately think, not say it out loud, I immediately have, I try to project the thoughts that I'm coming in here peacefully. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I respect the woods. I love it as much as anybody else. I just think these things when I'm walking around. I think they pick up on that. Maybe I'm nuts. Maybe I'm crazy. But I think they pick up on that. And I've heard, which I'm sure you have too, there's so many stories of people out there where when they're in areas where there's a lot of sightings and stuff like that, they go out there and they've had so much like energy pressed on them that they actually get nauseous, like that kind of thing, and are forced to leave. So, I believe that they have some type of, communication,
Oh yeah, I
with
agree.
that.
I've spoken with Native Americans, and that's what they say, that if you don't respect the forest, you will anger the spirits. And that's why they leave tobacco or coffee or, let's say, sweetgrass out
Yeah.
there as like an offering, or else you're going to tick these things off. And what the Native Americans described the Sasquatch as were the policeman of the forest, and they're pretty much protectors, guardians of the woods. And if you took them off, they're definitely going to let you know it.
Yeah, and like I said, it's just the feelings you get. Like you feel like somebody's communicating with you. When you're walking around there, I just feel like I get strong. And when people say, if somebody had never experienced that, it's like, well, you could just be thinking that. And I'm like, I agree with you 100%. But the reason why I don't think that is because it's such a strong feeling. You know, it's not like I'm not wondering if something's trying to talk to me. You know what I mean? Something is communicating to me if that's what's happening. It just doesn't seem like something that you're, because we all think about things. You walk around thinking about stuff all the time, right? It's not like that. It's not like I'm thinking about winning the lottery, that kind of thing. Like something's trying to communicate with me. I feel very strongly, about it. Now, I felt like I was being followed, like something was. I don't know. Sometimes I've heard stories that sometimes people think that, juveniles and stuff like that, like to play around and kind of follow you. I just had that strong sense of not being watched. I get that every time I go out there, but being followed. I turn around, nothing's there. I just had that feeling something's walking like 2 feet behind me. I turn around, nothing's there. Just don't, never heard anything like the other footsteps, but I
Oh,
get
yeah.
that feeling a lot, like something's following me.
Yeah, your senses are heightened, especially when you're out in nature. And maybe people that are listening who can't relate to this, have you ever had someone standing behind you and the hairs on the back of your neck stood up, and there was someone staring at you, or maybe you had this feeling that someone just wasn't up to no good, and your intuition was right? I know I've heard stories from 9/11, the people that went into the Twin Towers. A lot of people said just something felt really off that day. And you have this discernment, this wisdom that God gives you, and when something's off.
Yeah.
But when you're out in the woods, every little stick break, any little noise is going to catch your attention. But
Yeah, and check this out. Along with what you just said, I think some people can kind of tune in better than others to what you said. I think everybody has the ability to do it, but some people just do it for whatever reason. Because I've been riding motorcycles my whole life, never wore protective gear or anything like that. Until I got in this wreck I was about to tell you about. But just I'd ride around in shorts, t-shirt, sport bike, driving a little bit above the speed limit, that type of thing when I was younger in my 20s. And one day I was in my driveway, and this is after I'd already had children, and I got ready to get on my bike. Right, my bike, I'd warmed it up, same routine. Start it, let it warm up for a minute while I'm grabbing my helmet. I'd already had the engine running. Went to grab my helmet, and something told me, "Go get your jacket." I had an armored jacket, protective jacket. Just never wore it except when it was in the wintertime when it was really cold. Never wore it in the summer. So keep in mind, I have never worn a protective jacket at this point. Been riding for my entire life since I was 4 or 5 years old. And I something said, "Go get your jacket," and it was that same strong feeling, where I don't think it's me telling myself that. Went upstairs. I don't live at this address anymore, but I went upstairs, grabbed my jacket. I was 2 houses down from the neighborhood pool where you take a right. So I'm on the same side of the pool. So if you're out of my driveway and my house is to the left, you go 2 houses and take a right. So I went down my driveway, took a left out of my driveway, went 2 houses and took a right. And I slipped on some sand, and it slipped so quick I didn't even have a chance to let go of the bike. So when I hit the ground, both of my hands were still on the handlebars, and my head, it was just like, like like a toy almost. Look, my feet and hands never came off the handlebars and pegs. It just swept completely out from underneath me, and my head hit the curb, scraped up the whole side of my helmet. I'm not even sure if I would live through that, but if I did, even though I was only going probably 20 miles an hour, it would have hurt really bad to scrape up my whole helmet. And then it scraped up the whole shoulder and elbow on my thing. A lot of my weight fell on my elbow. To this day, I think my elbow would have broken in a million pieces, but something saved me that day. I don't know what something did.
yeah, that's incredible. And I feel like this is the sense that the Sasquatch have out in the forest. And when we enter the woods, they automatically know, hey, someone's coming, without hearing
Yep.
us, smelling us, knowing that we're there. And they just know. And I think they're able to avoid us with this sixth sense. And they're highly tuned into nature and the universe. But I feel like it's something biblical. I'm not going to say, I don't know.
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you. Sometimes I don't like to open up too much because everybody thinks you're crazy just for
Mhm.
believing in Sasquatch anyway. But yeah, I think it's very, very, very biblical. Like the orbs. I think that they come in and out of there. I think that they can go to a different dimension and come back and forth. I've heard people say that they like the deer and the food here and stuff. Because like one of the places that I go, there's no way that they're not leaving and going somewhere else. They have to be leaving during the day and going somewhere. So, I'm not disagreeing because sometimes people think that they can blend in with like the trees and stuff like that. It's just, I don't discredit anything because, my beliefs right now are so different than my whole entire life up until 5 years ago. Like when my son saw one of them. Vanish in the thin air, just melt, just disappear right in front of his eyes. It didn't run off and disappear into the woods. No, it vanished. Just things like that. So there's more to it than we know. Everybody thinks they know everything. We all know nothing. But yeah, there's definitely something to that.
Without a doubt. And I don't know, I had someone in the comments say that if you're going to talk about religion, you should start a different channel. And I was like, why? Religion gives us more insight on the cryptid subject than science and the government. So why start another
Yeah,
channel and people are allowed to express their own feelings regarding what this is? I feel like I would be not doing the subject justice if I said, oh, you're not allowed to talk about God. Keep that to yourself, because like you said, the orbs, the cloaking, the mind speak,
yeah,
not finding a body, tracks just disappearing, like that's strange. And not only that, the other cryptids that are out there, I feel like this is something next level, and no animal is going to turn into an orb or be associated with balls of light. It's definitely something from what the Bible refers to as like the Nephilim or the animals that they created in those times. I feel like that personally, and I respect people who don't agree with that.
yeah.
That's
I
okay.
definitely agree. There's something more to it. I don't know what it is either, but I think that these orbs is how they travel, so to speak. I don't know if they're going to a different dimension or a different area of the forest, but I think that has something to do with the way they're able to travel.
Yeah, it's either
And I
them in
definitely think
spiritual form or like a portal opening up. It's hard to say.
yeah, but I definitely think they can travel to other dimensions.
Hmm.
But yeah, and what do you think? I'll ask you one quick question if you don't mind. What do you think about like I know I sent you one picture. I don't know if you saw it. It was one of the best ones I've ever seen. I call them tree squatches, but it's just when a face is, you walk around, you look at a tree and you just see a face in it. I mean, that was where sometimes I kind of think like, all right, do these things have the ability, like if I'm out walking around, they can just blend into it, like turn into a tree or something or merge into one? Like, I don't know. I'm not saying that happens, but um, that one picture that I sent you, it was after those other ones I sent you. All the other pictures I sent you, except for the one I'm talking about, I took myself. This one is what's so remarkable about it is feel free to put that one on the website on your when you post this if you want to. This is not even, if I remember right, somebody might correct me. I don't think it was there's a person in the video. It's a YouTube video. I don't think it was somebody researching. I think I watch a lot of camping videos and motorcycle videos. So this person never saw that picture I took. When I saw it, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And I stopped the camera or stopped the video, rewound it a couple of times. But this is almost not even like a tree squatch where it's like some people like. I'm not talking about like a couple knots with a scratch. It looks like a smiley face. I'm not talking about that. Like it looks like a face. But it's in the tree. The person's leaning the other way. They never saw it. The whole video, they never saw it. I just happened to see it, and thought it was one of the most amazing ones. I have seen some pretty good ones. So that one, I'm like, most of them I just think it's a picture. Some people say maybe they're drawing pictures on the trees, stuff like that. But this looks like a face. Like it's nothing like I've ever seen. It blew my mind. But yeah, I don't know if what are your thoughts on that kind of thing? And if you don't, if the questions are only on me, that's acceptable. I just was curious what you think about the tree faces and stuff like that.
Yeah, it definitely looked like a face to me, and I thought it was very, very interesting to look at. And Yeah, sometimes we take photos and something shows up that we didn't see there in person. Do you think that was more something supernatural, or do you think something was physically there? I mean, it's on the tree. It looks like a face. What are your thoughts about that?
I'd say on most of the ones I see that it's probably a design or maybe something they've done, or I feel like they make. I've got several pictures where they make art out of stumps. Like I've seen a stump that looks just like a duck. I've seen one that looks like a dog. When I say just like it, it's hard to explain. But like when you're coming around a corner and you see it, like whoa, stopped in my tracks. I thought that was a dog, and I had to walk over to it. And we got halfway over, and I see it's not. But I don't know, man. That one that I sent you, like that's the one that I took off the video. I have several that I'm not sure what they are. That one to me, it looks like a Sasquatch is blended into that tree because the features and everything are so distinct. I don't know, but I know what you're talking about. Where I've taken a lot of pictures before, and things show up that aren't in the picture. Like you know, the trunk of a tree might show a weird kind of face, or leaves that you stand there and look at this stuff. Leaves will kind of blend into faces, and I'm not talking about a clear as day Sasquatch face. I'm just talking about it looks like something, right? So sometimes I see those on photos. Um, there's people that made videos just about that kind of stuff. But I do feel like sometimes I see faces like in the mud. I told you I found two tracks. One of the tracks looked like I had a face kind of. When I say face, it's not an actual face, but I could see a face fairly clearly enough for me just to, I'm mesmerized. I see a track, right? The last thing I'm thinking about is seeing a face in a tree or something like that. So that was the first track I'd ever seen in person. I've only seen, I think, two, maybe three. I think I know two of I can think of right off the bat, um, where it kind of looked like I had a face in it. And then how did the track get in the middle of a trail in this kind of an open area? So unless this thing had like a 30-yard leap, how does one track get there? It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of when Ron Moorhead said these things are in the trees, and he talks a lot about the supernatural and just the unknown that's associated with Bigfoot activity.
Yeah, I know I think I had heard in one of your videos you said one time, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you had an experience like with a UFO or something kind of paranormal like that. Is that true or not?
Oh yeah, I've had a lot of paranormal
Okay,
experiences
because
and a lot of
and
UFO
I have
stuff.
too. Do you not feel like that sometimes? Like I feel like people have no experiences, or it's almost like you were saying. I don't know if you're marked, tagged. They feel comfortable with me because I express my presence when I enter the woods. But this also goes back to things where sometimes you say people say something um, or see something and don't want to talk about it or repress it because I my memory had blocked this out for about 35 years. But when I was about 8 or 10 years old, and I remember it vividly, and it wasn't like I'd forgotten about it. It just I didn't know what it was, and it wasn't important to me at the time. But I was sitting on my back porch. I'm guessing I was 8 or 10 years old, and I just looked out over, I guess, kind of over the people's house behind me in my neighborhood, and there was a. I mean, if you Google like UFO or flying saucer, I feel like it's the common one of the common ones seen. So it was sitting there hovering, and I watched it for about 5 minutes. It was really big. Like looking back at it, I'm like, how did everybody in the neighborhood not see it? But I wasn't processing that way, as a small child. But it was like, it wasn't completely flat, but the kind of football shape, so to speak, flying saucer. And it had orange lights rotating in a circle. And I cannot to this day remember because somebody had asked me that when I was talking to them about it. Was it clockwise or counterclockwise? And I can't remember, but I just remember orange lights, circular lights, if I remember right, going in a circle around it. And it just hovered there. I didn't even, I mean, it wasn't even this big deal to me to sit there and see if it flew off or took off. But I remember sitting there watching it for quite enough time, to just vividly look at it, as long as I wanted to. I stopped looking at it when I got tired of looking at it. And I never thought about that again until I was about 30 years old. Somebody pulled up. It might have been one of those times on UFOs. Sometimes they'll be more popular on TV than other. I can't remember if somebody pulled something up online and was just showing me something joking, or if it was on TV. But I saw that and I was like, "Whoa!" I saw one of those when I was a kid. I'd never thought about it for that long. And that's weird. I know somebody listening could very easily say it's a false memory or you're making it up or not believe me. I'm just telling you exactly how I remember it. And I can remember how I was sitting on that back porch, like I very vividly what the trees looked like, almost like if I was looking at a picture. I remember it extremely vividly, but never gave it two thoughts, until somebody showed me that picture, and I guess it just refreshed my memory, or made me want to talk about something I didn't really think was a big deal. I guess my mind treated it as just walking by and seeing a stick laying on the road. It wasn't a big deal to me. Like if I'd have saw it somewhere now, it was. I did see something about uh, what was this? Maybe within the last 5 or 10 years, I was standing in my front yard, just looking up at the stars and stuff, and kind of in an airplane path. Even though I'm probably an hour from the Charlotte airport, there's a flight path. Anywhere around here, there's planes flying all the time at certain hours. But just happened to stand there, wasn't thinking about anything, just out there in the front yard, chilling, looking up at the stars. Just got dark. Might even been taking my dog out to use the bathroom, just in the front yard on the leash. But I just remember looked up, and a little bit to my, maybe kind of 2 o'clock, looked up and over to my right, and I saw a white light coming at me. I just thought it was a plane, because they actually kind of come from that direction sometimes. And it was just flying, like, it looked like at the speed, like a plane at regular altitude flying towards you. Nothing to see here. And I watched it for about 4 or 5 seconds, only because it was the only plane in the sky. I was just kind of just caught my attention. And all of a sudden, it was kind of coming toward me, right, at a 2 o'clock angle. So, like, if I'm looking forward towards the street in my front yard and look over and up at 2 o'clock, it would have been flying directly at me. And then as I'm looking at it, so I'm standing kind of looking at it now, all of a sudden, it took off and it was gone out of the galaxy in like a millisecond. It left a trail and it moved like all I can explain when I explain to people. When I say explain to people, I've told like 2 people, like a million miles an hour, just completely like something you would see on Star Wars or Star Trek, whatever. It blew my mind. I don't know what it was to this day, but it was fast. And it wasn't like, I'm not talking about F-16 fast. I'm talking about, you could see the distance it had gone. Like, it looked like it traveled a million miles in a millisecond. It was gone.
Yeah, that's incredible. I've seen similar, and a lot of people who have encountered Bigfoot do encounter the paranormal and UFO activity, and I feel like it's one and the same. It makes me wonder why
it's connected somehow.
Yeah, why certain individuals have these experiences, and yeah, I definitely feel like it's connected.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to think if there's any. Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask, do you have any other Bigfoot experiences you would like to share before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's all I can think of.
Okay. Well, Tom,
I enjoy watching the show, though. Yeah, I appreciate you.
I appreciate
you
that.
having me on. Actually, when I reached out to you, I didn't even really, want to be on the show. I was just kind of wanting to chat and talk. But like I said, it doesn't bother me. We're not going to use my real name, so. But for anybody listening, I would like to say, I guess anybody could say this. Maybe this will create more negative comments. I don't really care about the comments, but everything I've told is factual, detailed, and just to the point as I can. Like I haven't exaggerated anything to Hollywood it up. Just as I remember it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you decided to share these encounters, these experiences on the channel, and it really means a lot to me, and it was definitely worth it.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, Tom, you have yourself an excellent day. Take care of yourself, and if you encounter these things in the future, or if you find more structures that are very intricate, feel free to share them with me.
All right, I'll do that, and I appreciate having me on, Miguel. Best of luck to you.
Thank you. Take care.
All right.
Bye. Thank you for tuning in to Sasquatch Theory. Tom's encounters remind us that there is so much more about this world we still don't understand. From Sasquatch sightings to dogman encounters and unexplained orbs, the forests of North Carolina hold many secrets. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with others who are curious about the mysteries of the unknown. If you guys can, support the channel in any way possible, whether it's subscribing, liking the video, commenting, or sharing your own personal Bigfoot encrypted encounters with me here on Sasquatch Theory. There are people that contact me from time to time wondering how they can donate to the channel and help support the cause, but it's a lot easier if you guys donate through the thanks button, PayPal, or purchase some merchandise on the Spreadshop website. It certainly helps out the channel, and I appreciate every single one of you. Until the next one, keep your eyes open, stay safe in the woods, and never stop searching for the truth.